Hello again. Welcome back to Order of the Pie, the podcast where music history, the stories behind the songs, and a little something in your glass all come together. I'm Christopher, and today we're talking about one of the most recognizable symbols in music history. It's a simple black and white sticker, and you see it on albums like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, Mötley Crüe, countless others. And if you bought music in the late 80s and 90s, you probably remember a time when that little sticker sat in the corner of the album cover, warning parents that the music inside contained explicit lyrics. But for a lot of teenagers, it didn't work as warning. It worked as advertising. I mean, come on. The more dangerous the album looked, the more appealing it became. For nearly 2 decades, that little black and white sticker became a familiar sight in record stores and on CD racks across America. But that had to start somewhere, and surprisingly, it didn't start with rap music, and it didn't start with heavy metal. It began in Congress. It started with Prince, one song, one concerned parent, and a controversy that would eventually put the music industry on a collision course with the United States Senate. This is part one of the story behind the Parental Advisory sticker, and it begins with a girl named Nikki. By 1984, Prince wasn't simply popular, he was everywhere. Purple Rain spent 24 consecutive weeks at number one. The movie was a massive success. The soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of the decade. Songs like Let's Go Crazy, When Doves Cry, Purple Rain dominated radio and MTV. Prince wasn't just pushing boundaries from the edge of popular music, he was standing directly in the middle of it. And that's important, because the controversy that followed wasn't sparked by some obscure record hidden in the back of a music store. It came directly from the biggest selling album in America. The song at the center of the story was Darling Nikki. Unlike the major hits from Purple Rain, it wasn't released as a major single. You couldn't accidentally hear it on the radio every day. You had to own the album. And that's exactly what happened when Tipper Gore purchased Purple Rain for her 11-year-old daughter, Corinna. According to Gore's account, the two listened to the album together, then Darling Nikki came on. The song opens with Prince introducing us to a woman named Nikki.
I knew a girl named Nikki, I guess you could say she was a sex fiend.
And right away, you know this isn't one of your radio-friendly moments on Purple Rain. This character is dangerous, seductive, mysterious. And then comes the lyric that would help change music history forever.
I met her in a hotel lobby, masturbating with a magazine.
And that one line reportedly shocked Tipper Gore and helped launch a national conversation about explicit lyrics in popular music. But the controversy wasn't limited to one single lyric. That entire song carried a provocative tone.
How'd you like to waste some time? And I could not resist when I saw little Nikki grind.
By the end of the song, Prince had created one of the most memorable characters in his catalog, and he probably had no idea that he had helped launch one of the most famous controversies in music history. Tipper Gore later described being surprised and embarrassed by what she heard, and whether you agree with her reaction or not isn't really the point. What matters is that she wasn't alone. Many parents felt the music was becoming more explicit and that they had very little information about what was actually being contained on the records that their children were playing.
I just couldn't believe my eyes. She had so many devices, everything that money could buy. She said,
And that's where the story becomes more complicated than it's often remembered, because the people who started this movement weren't originally talking about banning records. They were talking about information. At least that was the starting point. Tipper Gore began discussing the issue with several influential friends in Washington who shared her concerns. Together, they formed an organization called the Parents Music Resource Center, better known as the PMRC.
sign your name on a dotted line. The lights went out and Nikki started to grind.
Their goal was simple. They wanted the music industry to give parents more information on what was on the records that their kids were buying. That sounds fairly straightforward, but almost immediately another question appeared. Who gets to decide what's objectionable? And once that question enters a room, things get a lot more complicated because songs rarely mean the same thing to everyone who hears them.
I can't tell you what you did to me, but my body will never be the same.
The PMRC eventually assembled a list of songs that they believed represented some of the most troubling content available in popular music. The list became known as the Filthy 15. Looking back today, it's fascinating because it reveals less about music and more about what many adults feared in the mid-1980s. The list really isn't about one artist or one genre. It's a collection of concerns about sex, about violence, about drugs and alcohol, and about the occult. and concerns about a generation of young people consuming media that their parents didn't fully understand. Now, this list included songs by, Prince, Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, Def Leppard, Judas Priest, Twisted Sister, Mötley Crüe, Black Sabbath, and even the actor Harry Dean Stanton. This wasn't a list of one kind of music. It was a list of fears. And here's the twist that's worth mentioning. Prince wasn't responsible for just one of the Filthy 15 songs. He was actually responsible for two. Because Sheena Easton's Sugar Walls was actually written by Prince under the pseudonym Alexander Nevermind. See, Prince loves pseudonyms. He wrote Sugar Walls as Alexander Nevermind, and around the same time, he was giving songs to the Bangles under another name, Christopher. Great name. Apparently one Prince just wasn't enough. And this isn't just a fun bit of Prince trivia. It means that the artist whose song launched the PMRC also secretly wrote another song that landed on the PMRC's infamous list. You couldn't script this better. Sugar Walls made the Filthy 15 because of its sexual themes and its very obvious double meanings. Let's just say that nobody thought the song was actually about home improvement. To the PMRC, this is just another example of pop music becoming even more openly suggestive. By 1985, Madonna wasn't just a pop star. She was becoming a cultural lightning rod. Everything she wore, every video she made, nearly every lyric she sang seemed to generate a discussion. Her song Dress You Up made the Filthy 15 because of its sexual innuendo. Officially, it's a song about clothing. Unofficially. Then nobody really thought it was about clothing. You got style, that's what other girls say. You can understand why parents might have raised an eyebrow, but at the same time, this wasn't graphic. It wasn't profanity. It wasn't explicit in a way that many people think of explicit music today. It was suggestive, double meaning. And that's what made Madonna so effective. She often said just enough to let the audience fill in the blanks, which raises another interesting question. Should songs be judged on what they literally say or by what everybody understands them to really mean? Because once you start answering that question, you've entered the exact same debate that the PMRC was having in 1985. And then there's Cyndi Lauper's She Bop. In 1984, Cyndi was one of the biggest stars in the world. Girls just want to have fun and made her an icon, and time after time showed that she could deliver a beautiful ballad. Then came She Bop. On the surface, it's a bright and playful and incredibly catchy song, but underneath that bouncy beat and doo-wop inspired vocals was a song about self-pleasure, and Cyndi wasn't exactly hiding it. Their lyric is actually pretty funny because it references that old myth that's been around for generations, and for many listeners, the joke probably went over their heads. In fact, one of the great ironies in the Filthy 15 is that the songs become more controversial only after the adults explained what they meant. It's entirely possible that the PMRC introduced more people to the meaning of She Bop than this song originally did itself. A lot of people heard She Bop and simply heard a quirky Cyndi Lauper hit. The PMRC heard something completely different, and that's one of the reoccurring themes in this story. The same song, the same lyrics, two completely different interpretations. Oh, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, PMRC. We might have missed it. Then came Def Leppard's High and Dry Saturday Night. Compared to some of the other songs in the Filthy 15, this one almost feels harmless today. The PMRC cited it because it references drinking and intoxication. And to be fair, the song doesn't exactly hide the subject matter. I got my whiskey, I got my wine, I got my woman. Yep, pretty straightforward. Joe's been drinking all day. He's got his whiskey, he's got his wine, he's ready for Saturday night. By modern standards, that hardly feels shocking, but that's part of what makes the Filthy 50 so fascinating. This list isn't simply about explicit lyrics. It's about what parents feared in 1985, and alcohol was very much part of that conversation. Looking back, it's kind of hard not to smile at this one. On a list that included Prince, Judas Priest, and Twisted Sister, Def Leppard essentially got called to the principal's office for admitting that they liked whiskey and wine. Then there was Judas Priest. If Madonna represented innuendo and Def Leppard represented alcohol, Judas Priest represented something else entirely: heavy metal. And by the mid-1980s, few genres worried parents more. Their song Eat Me Alive made the Filthy 15 because of its sexuality-charged lyrics and aggressive imagery. To the PMRC, this wasn't playful suggestion. This was something darker, something more dangerous. To many parents, songs like these seemed to confirm their worst fears about heavy metal. The music was louder, the imagery was darker, and the lyrics seemed to be pushing boundaries farther than ever before. And if there was one genre that appeared to symbolize these fears, it was heavy metal, which makes what happened next all the more surprising, because one of the musicians who challenged those assumptions wasn't Judas Priest. It was Dee Snider of Twisted Sister. Today, most people hear We're Not Gonna Take It as a rebellious anthem. A song about standing up to authority, a song about refusing to be pushed around. The PMRC, on the other hand, cited it for violence.
We're not gonna take it. Hell, we ain't gonna take it.
The band viewed this as satire, a giant cartoon. Even the video that played for months on MTV played everything for laughs.
We're not gonna take it anymore.
But Dee Snider's bigger argument was that people were hearing violence where there was none intended. To him, We're Not Gonna Take It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about standing up to authority, pushing back, and refusing to be controlled.
We'll fight the powers that be, just don't pick on destiny.
Snider believed that critics had completely misunderstood the song, and that misunderstanding was about to put him in front of the United States Senate. But Twisted Sister really isn't the issue anymore. The bigger question is, who gets to decide what the song means? Neither side was necessarily listening for the same thing, and that became one of the central problems of the entire debate. What happens when listeners hear something that the artist never intended? Or what happens when the artist insists a song means one thing while the audience hears something else completely? Those questions don't have easy answers, and they weren't limited to Twisted Sister. The same argument appeared throughout the Filthy 15. Was Madonna being provocative? Of course. Was Prince pushing boundaries? Absolutely. But should a warning label be based on intent, interpretation, content, context? Nobody seems to agree, and that's why the controversy continues growing. The PMRC wasn't just talking about a handful of songs anymore. They were talking about the role music played in American culture. The recording industry pushed back, the artists pushed back, and fans pushed back, yet the discussion wasn't going away. In fact, it became impossible to ignore. One of the most interesting things about the Filthy 15 is what it reveals about the era itself. The mid-1980s were filled with cultural anxiety. Parents worried about drugs, they worried about the change in social values, they worried about what their children were watching on television, listening through their headphones. MTV had only been around for a few years, but it had already transformed how music reached the audiences. Artists weren't just voices anymore, they were visual personalities. Music videos made controversial themes even more visible than before. And at the same time, heavy metal was becoming increasingly popular. Pop stars like Madonna and Prince were pushing boundaries, and music was beginning to feel less predictable than it had a decade earlier. So for some parents it was exciting, for others it was alarming. The Filthy 15 became a symbol of those concerns, but the list also revealed something else. The songs themselves weren't nearly as similar as people often remember. Prince and Cyndi Lauper weren't making the same kind of music. Neither sounded like Judas Priest, and Judas Priest sounded nothing like Madonna. The only thing connecting them was the belief that they represented a problem. Whether they actually did was a matter of opinion, and those opinions were about to collide in a very public way. As the PMRC gained attention, so did the criticism. Musicians worried that the warning labels could become slippery slope. Record companies worried where the process might lead. Some people viewed the proposal as a reasonable request for information. Others saw it as censorship wearing a friendlier face. The debate quickly moved beyond the record stores and into living rooms. Now it was attracting national attention. Newspapers covered it, television, politicians even noticed. And before long, the issue landed somewhere nobody expected: the United States Senate. The PMRC had made its case. The Filthy 15 was making headlines. And now the musicians had finally had an opportunity to respond. What happened next produced one of the strangest days in music history. A day that featured a heavy metal singer who shattered expectations, a legendary musical provocateur that refused to back down, and an unlikely witness whose appearance surprised almost everyone. But we'll get to that next time, because the most fascinating chapter of the story is still to come. Before we go, it's time for tonight's cocktail. And this one could only have one name, The Darling Nikki. Because without that song, there may never have been a Filthy 15. There may never have been a Senate hearing, and there may never have been a Parental Advisory sticker. One album track, one lyric, and one of the biggest unintended consequences in music history. Like the song itself, this cocktail looks inviting, a little mysterious, a little seductive, and it may be just a little dangerous, because sometimes the things we are warned about become the things we are most curious to experience. This cocktail is built around dark berry flavors and a deep purple color inspired by Purple Rain. It's sweet at first, but underneath there's a little bite. Kind of like the song. Now here's how you make it. In a shaker, you're going to take 2 ounces of vodka, 1 ounce of blackberry liqueur, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice, 1/2 ounce of simple syrup, and 2 dashes of orange bitters. You're going to shake that with ice and strain into a chilled coupe glass. Garnish with a blackberry and a lemon twist. And the color should be deep, rich purple, a drink that looks elegant, but hits a little harder than you expect, which feels entirely appropriate for a song that changed music history. Next time, the story moves to Washington. The Senate hearings begin, Dee Snider takes the stage, and Frank Zappa refuses to back down. And then we have our unlikely guest, but we're going to hold that till next week. We will also find out how the Parental Advisor sticker was created in the first place, and why the warning label designed to discourage record sales may have become the greatest marketing tool in rock and roll history. Until then, here's the loud riffs, quiet sips, and the stories in between.